So, this project has been in the works since like 2019, and I've rented like countless scripts and rewritten them, but I wasn't fully happy with how they went. So, I think I finally made a script that works. Like, have you ever wanted to write about your favorite thing in the world? Be it a character, toys, movies, comics, and so on, that does not just do justice to the thing you wanted to talk about, but also the person or people who not only brought the thing into life, but also were one of the many reasons why you turned out the way you did. Like, I can look back in life and find sort of things, be it games, movies, or shows, that made me into the person I am today. Now, you might be asking, what is this video about? Well, if you look at the title, it's the start of a full-blown retrospective to one of my favorite superheroes of all time, and the movies that came with it. The spectacular, the sensational, the amazing Spider-Man! I've been a Spider-Man fan since I was a kid, watching things like Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, the 90s Spider-Man cartoon, and of course Spider-Man 2 when it was in theaters. But because of Doc Ock's tentacles going on a murderous rampage, I had to leave the theater because I was scared. Yeah, I just want the record to show that Spider-Man 2 came out in 2004. I was 6 going on 7 at that time. But yeah, I'm a huge Spider-Man fan, and I've been wanting to do this for a long time now. But given that there's a bunch of analytical video essays about who's the best Spider-Man and the best adaptation of the web slinger, I just want to find a different approach to this topic. And this is why it took so long to do a proper video on it. As of this moment, we have 3 people to play a live-action depiction of the Warcrawler: Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and Tom Holland. And ever since Andrew's movies, there has been countless debates and arguments over who is the superior Spider-Man actor. And to me, there's no real easy way to answer this question. I have always been one to believe that each actor brings something to the table that does remind me of the OG character that Stan, Steve, and Jack helped create and start with the original 100-issue run that everyone loves, that eventually evolved to the character we know now. Starting with this video, it's going to serve as a prologue to the series as a whole. Then each Spider-Man will have their own retrospective video. Talk about strengths, weaknesses, and things that happen in the behind the scenes that determine the outcome of the movie. My goal is to treat this series like a love letter to the movies that no doubtably had a hand in pop culture media as it is today, and have people leaving the series with a new understanding and appreciation to everything that went into each movies. So, how did I prep for this video series? Well, lots and lots of movie watching. All 3 Maguire Raimi's movies and their director's cuts. Both Garfield's and Webb's movies. And not just the three solo MCU Spider-Man movies with Holland and Watts. But every movie appearance with Holland's Spider-Man, so Captain America Civil War, and both Avengers Endgame and Infinity War. While I'm taking a break with those, I'll be watching people like Scott from NordSync, Totally Not Marx's 3 videos of the same movies, and a few other YouTubers who tackle talking about the web slinger and his movies and comics, which hopefully will give me a different perspective on the movies and the character of Spider-Man. Not to mention watching the behind the scenes and interviews of each and every one of these movies that I can find. And of course, lots and lots of reading. Currently, I'm making my way through both the original one written by Stan Lee with art by Ditko, Ramita Sr., and others, while also reading the Ultimate Spider-Man one written by Brian Michael Bendis and the artist who drew for that one up until the death of Spider-Man, while keeping up as much as I can with the current one of the web slinger, and reading other popular ones of the character and rereading what I have in my collection. Wow, that's a lot of homework for me. But before we get started with the movies, we have to start at the beginning. Instead of me going on and on about the history of Spider-Man, I'll let Stan Lee tell you how he created the character. I'm going to need the extra time to catch up on all the reading material.
So I've told this story so often that for all I know, it might even be true, because I really don't remember exactly, but I think I was watching a fly walking on a wall, and I said, gee, wouldn't it be cool if I had a hero who could stick to walls like an insect? I thought, I'll get a guy who's like an insect. So I figured, okay, what kind? What'll I call him? Insect Man? That didn't sound dramatic. Mosquito Man? Yeah, I went down the list. When I got to Spider-Man, oh, that sounded dramatic. So I figured I'd call him that, and then we had him shoot webs, and that was great. And again, I tried to keep it realistic. In order not to make him a typical hero, I made him an average guy who was kind of unpopular. He was sort of a nerd. The kids didn't like him. They thought he was a bookworm. He didn't have enough money. He had to support his old aunt. He was an orphan. He was shy and so forth. And it turned out he was somebody that the readers could relate to. So he became very successful. He became our most popular character.
Stan Lee goes on to mention that it was met with backlash from his editor. See, Amazing Fantasy was an anthology book that Marvel published from 1961 to 1962. It wasn't doing so well. Well, here are his words on it.
I ran into my publisher's office and I told him, this was my reaction, the reaction he gave me. Stan, that is the worst idea I have ever heard. First of all, people hate spiders, so you can't call a hero Spider-Man. You want him to be a teenager? Teenagers can only be sidekicks. And you want him to have personal problems? Stan, don't you know what a superhero is? They don't have personal problems. And I couldn't get Spider-Man out of my system. So we were about to kill a magazine. I think it was called Amazing Fantasy. It wasn't selling well, and we were sending the last issue to press. When you do the last issue of a magazine, nobody cares what you put in it because the book is dying. Just to get it out of my system, I put Spider-Man in Amazing Fantasy, feature him on the cover, forgot about it. A month later, all the sales figures came in. my publisher came racing into my office. Stan, you remember that character we both loved so much, Spider-Man? He said, let's do him as a series.
Yeah, after Amazing Fantasy 15, Spider-Man became almost an instant hit. The reason? He was probably the most relatable character Marvel created at the time, especially to kids and young adults. Like Stan editor said, heroes at the time were adults. Teenagers and kids were dedicated to the sidekick role, like Dick Grayson's Robin or James Buchanan Barnes' Bucky. So having a hero who went to school, got bullied, while having to learn about responsibility is a great way to sell comics. Now, for those of you who somehow don't know what happened in Amazing Fantasy 15, in the story we see everything that we get to know about Spider-Man, a young teenager named Peter Parker who lives with his aunt and uncle who are really, really old. The spider bite, the wrestling match, the incident that will define his entire life, and the most heavily misquoted passage in pop culture media. With great power, there must also come great responsibility. Now, his origin has been retold numerous times, so much so that it was a gag in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
All right, let's do this one last time.
All right, people, let's do this one last time.
All right, people, let's start at the beginning one last time.
Okay, let's do this one last time, yeah? For real this time.
These retellings normally don't get expanded on and are normally a 1 or 2 issue things usually found in What If comics and tie-in comics for Spider-Verse and Spider-Geddon. Now, these retellings, like in the Spider-Verse movie, will change a few things, from changing who dies because of Peter's lack of action to changing who gets the spider powers. Now, the most famous retelling of Peter's origin comes from the previously mentioned Ultimate Comics run from 2009, something I wanted to mention now for the future. Anyways, it wasn't until the next year where Spider-Man got a full-fledged series that picks up right where Amazing Fantasy 15 ended. And from this to issue 100 has been the issues that every Spider-Man fan has read as if it was law. It introduces everyone to major Spider-Man world galleries like Doc Ock, the Chameleon, Sandman, and more. But it also introduces the Fantastic Four to new readers. And for some reason no one really talks about how much they talk about the Fantastic Four in the early issues. We see a lot of the stuff that makes Spider-Man in these first 100 issues. We see him slowly grow from a kid that only cares about himself and his aunt and uncle, to a young adult who most definitely read Ayn Rand, to a young adult who lost the love of his life and cares for more people. We see Peter's ups and his downs, the triumphant victories and the lowest of defeats. And because of these stories, Spider-Man became the poster boy for Marvel, so much so for a while, he was on every Marvel comic even if he had no involvement in the story. So of course, sooner or later, the idea of a live-action Spider-Man movie would have came crawling along. A Spider-Man movie has been in the works since the 80s, at one point headed by the now defunct production company The Cannon Group, after a failed attempt by Roger Corman with Stan Lee writing the script. With Cannon, they went through a version of a script where Peter was a victim of a scientist experimenting on him and turning him into a human tarantula. This version was also going to be directed by Tobe Hooper, who's more known for Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. But Stan Lee came in and put a stop to this version real fast and demanded a more faithful version to the comics. The next version of the script included Peter getting his powers from a Kaleidotron experiment and has Doc Ock in a mentor turned enemy role. If any of that sounds somewhat familiar, you're ahead, and I just want you all to slow down a bit. We will get to that later. The cast list for this version of the movie was something else. Peter was either going to be played by either Scott Lever, who was on the cover of Amazing Spider-Man number 262, or young Tom Cruise. Lauren Bacall and Katharine Hepburn were considered to be Aunt May, and Stan Lee wanted to play old J. Jonah himself. But, because of, and I kid you not, Superman 4 and He-Man the Master of the Universe flopping, a change of directors, and Cannon being bought out, this version of the film dies out. Until 1989, when Menahem Golan, Sorry if I mispronounced that. One of the people who were in charge of the canon Spider-Man movie tried to bring it back alive while he was working at Sony. He wanted to use everything he worked on while at Canon, even having to sell television, home video, and theatrical rights to make sure that the project had production funds. One of the many places that got a piece of the Spidey pie was Calico Pictures, where James Cameron comes in. Now his version was set to be a more darker, more adult take of the character and feature Electro and Sandman as the villains, with heavy amounts of profanity and sex. Including, and I'm not kidding on this, a sex scene of Peter and MJ on the Brooklyn Bridge. Cameron also had in mind Leonardo DiCaprio as the web slinger. He didn't get to work on the film before having to go work on his smash hit The Titanic. Well, he ended up getting Leo to star in that film. He really wanted to work with Leo. Can you imagine a Spider-Man movie with Leonardo DiCaprio? It would have been wild, especially after reading that script. After a lot of legal stuff in the 90s with Marvel and a bunch of other companies, it wasn't until 1999 where Sony started to work on this project again. They lined up what seemed like every big name director at the time for a chance to direct this movie. Roland Emmerich, Tim Burton, Chris Columbus, Ang Lee, David Fincher, and even M. Night Shyamalan were all potential directors. Apparently they went with Fincher, but he didn't want to do James Cameron's version of the movie and wanted to go with the night Gwen Stacy died instead, and Sony passed on it. I really wish I had a joke about how Sony apparently does not want to do the night Gwen Stacy died storyline, but I don't. So in the comments, give me your best joke about that. It wasn't until January the year 2000 when Sam Raimi was attached to the film, with a planned release date of the first movie in the summer of 2001, with David Koepp writing a screenplay based on James Cameron's original script, and rewrites done by Scott Rosenberg. It wasn't released until 2002. Thank you guys so much for watching if you made it this far. It's been an interesting time editing this. It's kind of the first thing I've edited in this type of format in a long while. But if you don't mind, please subscribe. We'll be doing a Toby retrospective soon. That will be part 2. And I'll be doing other content, roughly around nerdy things. If you want to follow me on places like Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, everything will be in the description down below. Until next time, guys. See ya.